So there's so many things we could talk about, but what I most wanted to know in this journey, and for everyone listening to hear about, is you've been on this incredible journey of being a Persian woman, right, from Iranian culture, and all of the conditioning around relationship, your body, your sensuality, your sexuality. You've gone from that to owning your whole life path, your whole dharma, as this incredibly inspirational entrepreneur. You put yourself out there so boldly on social media. Whenever I feel your transmission, I'm like, this is a woman standing for the zero fucks given transmission of powerhouse goddesses everywhere. You're a lighthouse that calls us all forward. But then you had this next chapter where you owned your sensuality and your sexuality even more deeply. So can you take us to your upbringing, to your conditioning, to who you were before this awakening?
Yes. So my grandmother was in a forced child marriage when she was 13 years old to my grandfather. And every woman in my family before that has been in a forced child marriage. So my parents were the first people in my lineage to have chosen, met a stranger, and have gotten married to them after really just 2 months of knowing each other. And my mom fled Iran during the Iran-Iraq War as a refugee and came to the United States. So my lineage has a lot of feminine suppression, a lot of fear, war, having to literally leave everything overnight. And for a woman, your beauty was a commodity for you to get you the safety of a man, AKA resources, because women were not allowed to work. In many parts in the Middle East, they're still not allowed to. It's coming more, but there's still a lot of stigma around it. Stigma that I even grew up with. Career women will never get married. No one likes them. Divorced women, let alone, oh my God, they're a disgrace. They're so shameful. No one in our family gets divorced. So I grew up with this conditioning of be a virgin until you're married, give that gift to your husband, find the most successful man you can, learn how to accommodate to his needs, be the perfect trophy wife, always look good. I remember once my grandma was putting on mascara before she went to sleep. I'm like, why are you putting on mascara? She's like, well, what if your papa wakes up? It's like, what if he even sees her for a moment without makeup on? Yeah. And it's like that level of, always look your best, always be fit, always have your hair done, always look good. Like my mom would always be mad at me as a kid because I didn't want to brush my hair. I didn't want to and it was like, you have to look the part. And it was very much like your children are your trophies. Like, look at my daughter. She plays the piano. She goes to this school, she that. And that's your way of securing her a future with a successful man. So I grew up in that and I never really wanted to work. I was like, oh, I would love to do nonprofit work and, have my hobbies, but I'll marry a successful man one day. And, I don't want to be, cheated on. I don't want to be divorced. I don't want to be one of those career women. And then while I was in college, I started to really fall in love with health and wellness because I had gone through my own health challenges. And just to kind of share a little bit about that part of my story is my body started really shutting down. I had really bad digestive hormonal issues. I didn't get my period for 2 years. So you can kind of see I was really out of touch with my core feminine energy that my body stopped menstruating. And that brought me on the pathway of self-healing, eventually to Ayurveda. And I wanted to share this wisdom with the world. I ended up living in India for 2 years studying Ayurveda and then wanting to write a book about it. And that's when my parents were like, absolutely not. Like, you're going to be a starving artist. Like, you need to either find a husband or get a stable job, but you can't be getting advice from these hippies. And that, literally, and that really brought me on my journey of, is this life even mine to live? Mm-hmm. My parents sacrificed so much for me. So don't I owe them my whole life's purpose? How do I know? Maybe they're right, but also something deep in my heart is like, they're not happy either. And if I just take all my advice from them, I'll end up exactly where they are. So that time period of my life was a lot of questioning, unraveling. I ended up, staying in India. I was in Bali, meeting people who were like tantric life coaches and people like that I had never met before. And flash forward, a few years later, I came back to LA. I was living with my grandma at the time and shortly after met a man who became my husband. And he came from a Middle Eastern background as well. He was like born in the United States like me. So he was open-minded, but he still had that same kind of like, I saw it as like our culture and conditioning, And And he wasn't repressive by any means, but there was still a lot of unspoken expectation. Like, oh, you can't post a picture of yourself in a bathing suit or in that outfit. Like, what are people going to think? I know how men think. And just a lot of that continual programming. And in Middle Eastern culture, in a lot of cultures, it's like, that's how men show they care. You know, it's to control you. Right. So I was in that relationship for 7 years. Until I found out about a betrayal that was going on. And as soon as I found out, I knew that it was time for me to leave that marriage. And honestly, had that not happened, I would have stayed in it forever. Because of my conditioning is, you're married, this is your husband, till death do you part. Even though we had really grown apart, even though we weren't spending time together, we didn't really have mutual friends, interests. It was not in my periphery to ever think about a divorce, because you just accepted and you kept going. And I was just like, well, no marriage is perfect. And, at least he's there. And in my parents' marriage, I had seen my dad come home from work stressed out and then kind of go up into his office, shut the door until he was ready to eat dinner. And then me and my brother would have to sit almost like little minions, ask him questions. And then when he was done, it was like shut off again. And so that's all I had ever seen a man be. I had never seen a man be emotionally available, like actually talk to you about your day. And so I kind of was just like, yeah, that's what fathers, husbands do. They show up, they provide, you're on your best behavior. You only have a few minutes with them. So you better be interesting enough to hold their attention until they go back into their caves. So that's what I was just used to in my marriage as well. So that really shook me to my core. And I will be able to one day share the story more about what happened in a book. But I was essentially awoken in my sleep and given the red pill overnight. And that red pill of seeing something that I did not know was happening was like, what else do I not know is happening? What are the other because I was already like, this is guys, December 2022. It was like, I'd already written 4 books. I already had it's like, I was a deeply embodied already person. And to have this still go on, I was like, wait, I thought I was intuitive. Like, can I even trust myself then? Like, how did I not see this? And I think that's the hardest part of a betrayal is like, you really just gaslight yourself.
Yeah.
Can I even trust myself anymore? And I had a hard time making any kind of decision during that time period. I would just ask my friends because I was just like, I don't know. Obviously, I'm bad at making decisions here. And that made me start to look at, how was I normalizing the distance in our marriage from my childhood? How is this form of betrayal connected to my and his ancestry of generations of women who had been abandoned, abused, betrayed, and then made to hold captive to his story to protect him. And I was just like, this ends with me. And I was already a stand for the feminine, but it wasn't until I had experienced it to such a core level of it in my own life, of it being the demise of my marriage, which was like the safety and the only foundation that I knew. I was just like, oh, wow, like the patriarchy runs deep and it's hidden sometimes in your own home in ways that you would never experience.
It's still mapped all over your own body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And part of that mapping in the body was I started to realize how disconnected I actually was from my sexuality.